go ahead and call the meeting to order. It is 5:34. We are starting 4 minutes late. I'd like to welcome all the visitors and rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So we do need to amend the agenda, and this amending is pursuant to Idaho Code 74204. We have, I need to add a student issue to executive session. So at this time, I'll go ahead and entertain a motion. I'd like to make a motion to amend the agenda pursuant to Idaho Code 74204 to add an executive session for the student issue at this time. And to include an approval of the agenda.
I will second.
Hearing a motion and a second, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries. Moving into discussion, the first item of discussion is the monthly budget report format. At our last regular meeting, I had stated that I'd like to include the funds of the district actually with what we're reporting to the public, because there is a little, there's a discrepancy when, our audit came through, we're reporting $14 million, but we're telling the public we only have 5. And I realized that when you look at the audit, there are restricted funds along with the other categories of that 14 million, but we're telling the public the district only has 5 million when in fact, or actually it was 6.9 million last October, but there's actually 14. So my hope was that we could become more transparent and just showing the public what funds the district does have, what the expenses are, because when we're presented with the expenses, not all of those expenses are going against the general fund. They're going against all these other funds. So it was put on here for discussion to find out if any other trustees have input regarding that. If you don't and you just want it to remain a status quo, then we also, I want you to bring that forward as well. Any input from anybody?
I understand what you're talking about. I think for the layperson, it's hard for them to reconcile all of it together, right? To look at the published budget and then to look at the general fund, okay. And then maybe looking at the financials on the website. Mm-hmm. I don't know if we get that, if we change the complete format of the reporting or more explanation. I don't know how to, maybe Trustee Bain has some insight into that, but I'm not sure how we put all of that explanation together, how we make it flow.
I think I understand where Chair Thompson is coming from with wanting to be transparent and wanting to make sure that we're comparing, we're allowing, we're presenting numbers so that people can compare apples to apples. I get
yes.
that
Yes.
makes sense. So that they're not hearing one thing and then hearing another thing and not
right.
understanding why they don't match.
And I understand also that the majority of what transpires within the district's day-to-day is reflective with the general funds. I do get that. But when we're given all the goals and not all of those bills are coming against the general fund. Some of them are coming against COVID money, which, you know, the public has asked repeatedly, what COVID dollars, where are they? What are we spending them on? So if we just can show them, look, here's the monies, here's what goes out against them, here's the end of the day. I just think that's wiser.
That's not necessarily going to be how it's presented anyway, with, you know, with a bucket of COVID dollars, and this is where this is. That's not.
True, but we have COVID expenses coming through, and then I'm sure CFO Wallace gets tired of me saying, now, is this going through COVID dollars or is this going through general fund? Because there's no delineation on the expenses either. It's just, here's all the expenses, and then here's our
Well, in the
balance
monthly
sheet
bills,
of the
that's
general
how
fund.
it's going to. So are you wanting us?
And respectfully, I understood CFO Wallace's explanation that, you know, he could print, and I'm not looking for hundreds and hundreds of pages. I think he does a great job at summarizing and with his presentation. That looks really nice, and I think that's what the public can digest. But I struggle with the fact that, you know, we're telling the public we only have, well, now 6,900,000. When we actually have 14, and people are like, well, why is there such a discrepancy? If you're saying we only have 6.9, how did we get to 14? Well, the 14's, I mean, it's all been there. We just don't tell them except for once a year, and then that creates confusion. From my perspective.
Well, I think we have to figure out a way to show that, maybe through a workshop or something, I don't know. Or if you're just looking for, you know, all of this, you know, at the end of the month or quarter or whatever, you know, here's everything that came out of, you know, whatever the fund is, I don't know. Student nutrition or whatever its name is, gifted and talented program, or, you know, here's all the things that came out of there, or here's everything that was deposited into that, and
Well, even a quarterly review would be way more that we're giving the public than here's the annual budget that doesn't even coincide with what we give you every month.
I think I kind of heard you say two different things. One was we have expenditures without knowing exactly which account it came from.
We do.
And secondly, let's don't have a surprise at the end of the year with what the fund balances are going to look like.
Right.
Are those kind of the two gut level
Yeah.
issues? Trying to think about how to, in a simple, straightforward way, how to deal with that. Let me ask Brian. Bill list, for example, could you put another column that just shows GF or PFF or something like that, indicating what fund the expenditure came from? Would that be a big problem?
That would actually be maybe a little more, we could, sometimes expenditures are split between funds.
Right.
So that, I mean, but we, for the most part, not all the time, but you know, like when we're paying Chartwells, that's always in the food service fund.
Yeah.
So that would, I mean, that's one way we could do it, but like that BMO bill is split between the general fund through ASB funds, through classroom technology. It's, you know, it's a myriad of funds.
Right, which you have been giving us the one sheet that shows.
That sort of breaks it out in that.
Right.
I mean, I was looking at Skyward to try to get a report that'd be a little more simple. I mean, I could run, it'd be 2 pages per fund, sort of, because I can't, the way Skyward's working, I can't run a balance sheet, which sort of shows fund balance with my revenue expenditures. So I could run a balance sheet report for each fund, and it would sort of show the start of the year fund balance, and then sort of where we're at.
Year to date.
Year to date, and then it would have, And then I could run on another sheet, revenue and expenditures, and to keep it the most simple, I'd probably summarize it by just objects, salaries, benefits, purchase services. If I start spreading it out by, we run reports two ways, the function, you know, which is you see the elementary ed, and if I start spreading out the function, then it's gonna be a longer report, because we get a lot of, you could have, you know, 3 staff members who you're paying through one fund, so in the case it's not huge, but one is a special ed teacher, one is an elementary teacher, and one is, let's say, a secondary teacher. Those are 3 different functions, and then all the salaries are in 3 different functions, and the benefits, every benefit code, so it starts creating a lot of codes. So if you summarize by object, it sort of collapses it all. And it would be, you know, it'd be 2 pages per fund, and that wouldn't be, or I could take all other funds, everything excluding, and just lump it all together, and by, let's say by object. But then it would be, you know, plant facility fund would be lumped with classroom technology, with child nutrition. I don't know if that's disaggregating enough. But either the canned reports are doing that, that wouldn't be overly burdensome.
See, I don't know that we necessarily need to go into the weeds far enough to have that detail of information on every fund.
Right.
If we have something which
It's a summary of each.
brings it all together and gives us a kind of a balance at the end of the month, or at the end of the quarter, or the end of the year. I mean, that's what happens at the end of the year. You get the whole ball of wax.
Yeah, it's when you're keeping final score effectively,
Yeah.
right? I can certainly,
But it's kind of like keeping a running score, but not of all the details, just, you know, what's in, what's out.
and that,
Maybe general fund and then all other funds. Maybe that's the way to go.
so if you want, I can, you know, look at the one report, I can lump all other funds together, then I can do an example of like 5 funds, and you can just sort of see what it would look like. Or I could run them all and just send that to
How
the,
many funds do we have?
we're probably about
15.
15, maybe 20. We have some funds that don't have any activity. And we have base is its own fund, just a base program, because it's sort of its own revenues.
Yeah.
Title I, Title II, ESSER funds, plant facility fund, debt service fund, bus depreciation fund, child nutrition, classroom technology, miscellaneous grants. There's used to be the leadership fund that's going away with new legislation, but that was its own fund from the state. So a lot of them are defined by the state if they have to be separate.
Okay.
So we have Perkins, which is a CT grant, a small federal grant. We have another Title IV. Literacy is another fund from the state that, so I mean, it's just a lot of it. If it's a special revenue, the state asks us to create the fund, we've done that. So yeah, I mean, it'd be 15 to 20. I mean, I might have missed one in there.
I think maybe, I mean, just from what I'm hearing, I really think maybe we need to look at if the thing is what we're seeing at the audit. So is it the format of the audit, or just the appearance of a discrepancy between the fund balance as stated in the meeting and the fund balance as stated in the audit, plus all the other things? Because I think what it is, and you know, like I was saying, is maybe if we look at those 3 reports, we look at how the budget's presented, what the monthly looks like, and then what the audit looks like, and then come up with some mishmash that
Middle ground.
represents all that without, you know, all of this,
Okay.
you know, so we can get maybe a better drill down of, I mean, that would be my suggestion.
Okay.
And like Mr. Wallace was saying, you know, and I was thinking about that, you know, about multiple funds paying a certain thing, or like with, I think we've had the discussion with the Medicaid, and how that's actually just sort of like a flow through, like it's really
Yeah, that
You know.
fund is, right, and that was, and how we're doing the accounting for that fund is,
Right.
was directed by the State Department.
Right, exactly,
Yeah.
so that would, it's almost a moot point to even show that, because it's really, even though we have to show this circle of it happening, it's not, yeah, and that would be my suggestion
What if
anyways,
we-
is to.
Did like a budget to actual report for each fund, just to say, here's what the budget was, here's what we're actually at, whether it's revenues and expenses.
And
Cause
we
you're kinda
did-
doing that with the general fund anyway, but just more simple
Yeah, like in the budget,
presentation of that.
Correct, the one challenge, like the ESSER funds, like we've had some, like we didn't do a full, just for example, on ESSER 1, when it came out and we started spending like that, it was mid-year, we didn't do a budget review, we didn't really have we looked at where our costs were and directed them directly to those COVID costs that first year and things like that. We didn't have a budget. Other examples, and I know that's unique, but like the governor, literally, we had some funds that were given this year that were from COVID dollars, but they didn't come from the State Department of Ed, they came from the governor. And literally, we were given those dollars and given 2 months to spend. For example, like on classified staff for retention of staff. So,
But
or
don't you-
sub costs. So I guess my caveat is we'd have some funds that have a zero budget line, but expenditures.
Do you have to do a budget adjustment to be able to spend those dollars?
No,
No,
I've
okay.
asked the State Department that, no, we don't.
Okay, I just was curious, cause
Sure.
it could be just presented at the time that does happen.
Correct, and in fact, that's a great question, because in Washington, we would have had.
Mhm.
That was state law, but in Idaho, after the set budget, you're not required to, but many districts do.
Bob, did you have anything more to add?
No, I was just looking back at the report, that we got on the general fund, trying to figure out a straightforward but simple way
Right.
to address the issue. At the end of that report, you got the beginning balance and ending balance, essentially.
Right.
And I think that's all we're really asking for with the rest of the funds, and they can be put together in that respect.
Yeah, correct. I could certainly say this was the start of the year, here's where we're at, and have here's total expenditures and total revenues, all other funds,
Yeah.
and combine that, and that would be the most basic and simple. We cannot, but if they wanted to break down, if the board thought a breakdown of each fund, we could do that also. That's what I was sort of talking about.
Yeah,
So I mean, it's sort of what you guys think is best to meet your needs.
I don't feel a need for that much breakdown, but as long as we're getting a global picture of
Yes.
what's happening.
Yes. Yeah. So, with that being said, ideas for that global picture. Brian, do you think you could draft something? I mean, not necessarily come to the next meeting with a new here we go, but something for us to at least consider what your options are for providing the information.
Yeah, I
on
think
a
that
global.
would be a good way to go, is
Okay.
give you, here's one idea.
Yep.
And just sort of, either email it to Dr. Meyer or Janelle, or I could just send to all the board if you want and say thoughts, feedback, and maybe give a couple ideas and a couple formats and see
That'd be
if
great.
anyone fits.
Yeah.
That's fine,
That'd be great.
okay.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Okay, moving on to our action items. We need to, it was brought before us at the last meeting, but we didn't have an action item for the changes to the LJSD operational plan, which, just as a reminder, what the changes were on page 4. We updated the optional isolation guidance to sort of reflect, what the health district is doing, and then also on page 5, we changed the word will to may. So those are the two changes, to the operational plan that, we do need to have a vote on. Does anyone have any conversation or discussion they'd like to have about changes or the operational plan as it is?
I do not.
So we're gonna approve it as amended, is that the idea?
Yeah, we would, well, last year, yeah, okay, yes, as amended.
And then I just
Well, last year we
notified
just
the
kept
parents that it's been
reapproving it.
updated and,
Yeah.
and the state.
I would move that we approve the updated plan.
I'll second that.
Motion and a second, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries. The next item is the Audit Firm Rfq. We had been discussing, the fact that we have been consistently using, Hayden Ross. And it had actually been discussed, I believe it was at a prior board meeting, not like 3 or 4 years ago, or 5 or 6. It was on the 2016 minutes. The board member had said we shouldn't stick with one firm, so I had kind of brought that up with how long have we been with Hayden Ross, and it was just kind of, you always want to keep your wheels going and making sure that you don't get complacent, I think was the concept with your audit firm. Mr. Wallace has shared that there's not a lot around, so kind of at the mercy of what's available.
And I would tell you, you never get complacent with the audit firm. I guarantee you, you don't get complacent.
Okay.
Because they'll trip you right up if you do.
Well, so, what we need to decide is, if we wanna have more discussion about, doing an RFQ for another audit firm to see what's available, what our options are, what the cost involved is, or if we don't. I mean, the action item is, to approve, obtaining an RFQ for an audit firm.
How long have we been with them?
It's been many years.
Since I was superintendent,
30 years,
probably.
at least.
The actual lead auditors have changed.
Yeah.
So current lead auditor, Tony Matson, he's been the lead auditor, I think, since Becky's been here, but he was sort of transitioned, and he's actually one of his co-workers or staff named Bailey has actually each year has taken on a larger role of the audit. I've worked with them when I was at Coeur d'Alene. I worked with Magnuson, McHugh.
Yeah.
At Coeur d'Alene, I actually did a RFQ or RFP for audit services the board had asked us to do, and we were with Magnuson. We ended up through the process staying with Magnuson, but we at the time, I think we had, I don't know if Whipley, they're like a southeast Idaho firm, they might have done it. I Bailey, who now has a Spokane office, they did it. They were super expensive. And then Hayden Ross and Magnuson was about there. I know that Hayden Ross has done a couple RFPs, like with Boundary County up in Bonner's Ferry, and a couple others, and they've actually been going to them. They seem to be, Magnuson McHugh's had some staff turnover and have some challenges. So, we certainly can go through the process. It's never a bad thing. I mean, personally, with right now with a lot going on, I'd almost prefer at least to not do it this particular year, but we can certainly, if the board thinks it's important, I sort of had a timeline saying that if we needed to go, we needed to go, because we'll start scheduling our July our pre-audit in July, here pretty soon we'll start booking it out, and then we usually have dates in August and September. So we'd wanna have the firm on board, whatever firm, in their pricing and things like that,
That's my
before, too late.
That's my understanding. I thought we were under contract with Hayden Ross for this year's audit.
No, I think we had just signed we had a 3-year engagement that expired, and this year, I think, was just a 1 year. So if we did the RFQ, I think that's what you would do. You would say, what's your pricing for 3 or 5 years? If we, right now, we could ask, we're not required, just, it's not like going to bid for a public works project. We're not required to do audit services RFQ, because it's a service. So, and it's, the yearly amount is less than the threshold anyway. It's around $20,000 is what we're paying right now. So, I mean, we could certainly engage and say, we signed 5 years with you, would we get a better price in 3 years or 1 year, or what would that rate be? But if you wanted to sort of test the waters of the board and have that process, we can certainly do that also.
Thoughts?
Well, I appreciate Brian's comment that we do have a lot going on right now, I think, and to go through that process takes some time, takes some effort on the part of everybody that's involved with the audit. And I know Hayden Ross, obviously, they did work when I was here before. Always appreciated their efforts and thought they did a good job. There are very few auditing firms around. And at the time that we initially brought them in, we also looked at McHugh, and Hayden Ross was less expensive at that point. I don't know how it would compare now, but
Ms. Grissom? Any input?
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out, so the Hayden Ross letter that we got was for 21 through 2023. I'm trying to figure out how far we actually, so we must have, that's all I'm seeing, is that our engagement ended with them, ends with them this year, or did we do the 21 through 2023, which was?
I didn't think we did that many years, trust me, Kristen. I could be mistaken. I thought it had, that we were on a year to year is what. But I could.
Date in here, yeah. And maybe it was part of our conversation. I mean, I don't see any harm in the due diligence, and I'm not sure. Yeah, I think we should do the due diligence. At least we could say it's out of the way. What is the issue with doing it right now? I know you said you got a lot going on.
Well, this time of year is we
Budget.
start going in with budget, and that's obviously a big part. Negotiations coming up and things like that. And as far as the RFP, when I did Coeur d'Alene, we treated it like if I was going to have to bus bid. So I advertised twice in the paper. I have the format I used, and there's a lot of legalese, but a 10-page, with the information. I'd have to look and see if what we were asking Coeur d'Alene is the same services we're receiving from Hayden Ross, and make sure that we're asking for the same thing, because the level of service that we get here at Hayden Ross is more than what we got at Coeur d'Alene.
Sure. Yeah.
So I want to tweak that part, but then we send it out, we get the responses. When we were at Coeur d'Alene, we had a group of a couple of administrators, Katie Ebner, who was my treasurer and business manager, and our payroll person also was part of it because they're heavily involved in the audit. And I don't think a board member participated, but I know they had the opportunity. We would certainly want a board member to be on it if you wanted to be part of the process to evaluate. And we had a rating scoring sheet. It was, not price wasn't the only factor. It was references and work and past experience, and we sort of had our rating sheet and we saw how everybody rated, and then had that discussion. It was almost like a job interview, right?
Yeah.
And then, when we came to consensus where we thought was the best fit for the district, given all the factors, and we made the recommendation to the board. So we could do that, but that, it's a couple-month process when you're getting the responses from the audit firms and things like that. And so.
And I think typically, they may call in and ask some questions about the district, how the audits have been handled in the past and other kind of things. So somebody has to field that telephone call.
You were putting a binder together of all the contracts and whatnot we had.
Yes,
Do you have the contract in there from Hayden Ross?
I believe so.
Do you have that binder with you?
Not with me, but I believe it's in the lobby.
Okay. Would you mind going and grabbing that to see if the contract is in there? Because I'm curious what our contract is with Hayden Ross. Then we'll know.
Yeah, I was pretty sure that I thought it had, we were like kind of 1 year for last year, but I am becoming more of a seasoned citizen in my memory to be.
Well, I do remember that conversation.
Do you?
Yeah, I do remember the 1 year, but I don't know what we decided or.
This is for 2021.
That's the most recent one that I have, as far as I know.
I thought that was the most recent, but
Yeah, this one has my signature on it. Yeah, it was for fiscal year ending June 30th, 2021. So, yeah, we have no audit firm for them this year, 2022.
Right, so it would be, it's not unusual for districts, just, Trustee Thompson, that, who often only will do a 1 year engagement with auditor, and then next year they'll just say, you're our firm again, and just go forward for another year.
Okay.
You're not required to have a multi-year agreement, that's all I'm saying.
Okay.
So when we did the 1 year, last year, we could certainly just contact Hayden Ross and say, we're signing you up another year, or we can do a formal process.
Okay. Well, as it is I guess an action item, I didn't know we needed to take action for direction, but I'll go ahead and entertain a motion regarding an audit firm RFQ.
I'll move that we approve an RFQ for an audit firm.
I'll second. Hearing a motion and a second, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Nay. Okay, we have 2 ayes and 2 nays. Did you vote?
No, I didn't.
Are you abstaining? What are you doing?
I was just thinking.
Okay.
So if we vote no, then we're not gonna have one? Is that what's gonna happen?
We would not be asking for an RFQ for an audit firm. That is what the vote is for.
Or if you abstain, the same thing would happen.
I'll vote no. Yes.
Okay, then the motion fails. Alright. Moving on to the plant facility levy. Mr. Jones, you asked for this to be brought back up and you wanted to take action on that? Do you wanna talk about it?
Yeah, I would, however, with the chair's pleasure, I wouldn't mind hearing E4 discussion before we talk about plant facility.
Okay, go ahead, does anybody have an objection?
No.
Objection?
No, I think
No,
that's
I'm,
in order.
I'm good with that.
Okay.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Then let's go, move on to, we will skip over at the moment, the plant facilities levy.
Madam Chair, I just noticed that there was one document that was not included, so the January 13, 2022 meeting. There's a document attached to that agenda, the plant facility fund running balance, that I think would go along with the discussion also, or
Okay.
if we needed to reference it or look at it.
For the plant facility levy discussion?
Do you know which one she's talking about?
Yep,
What he did and then he,
Yeah, because I don't know who asked for it, it was a nice document.
Yeah. Can we get that linked in, Janelle? Thank you.
do you know which one you're talking
And then we'll move on to the capital projects, and then before we go back to plant
It's in our-
facility, we'll
it's in
need
our
to.
drive. It was one of those
And
weeks.
just so the, for a matter of, we, and I contacted Board Chair Thompson, this document that's up here, LJSD Aggressive Maintenance 2022, CFO Wallace and Facilities Director Ferriola spent 2 days getting this document. It was not able, with the short timeline, for it to be uploaded when the other docs were loaded, but we did get it done today. They got it done, not me. They got it done today. And you can see that he has, can they do it in the PDF? He has 2 tabs on the bottom. One is by school and one is by, and I know we shared it with the clerk so that you could actually see the Google spreadsheet. There's by building. The second tab is by priority, so all the 1s are together, 2s are together, 3s. I just want to acknowledge, if anyone that watches this or hasn't done this before, it was a ton of work. And they did put over there that you can see that they did make a caveat, this is the best estimates that they have. They didn't have time obviously to go get quotes, but they are both, you know, very well versed in expertise in this area, especially, you know, Mike Ferriola. His suggestion, which I shared with Board Chair Thompson, is that this, tonight, he has 2 items that he would really like to see approved, because this is on the action item, based on the board's feedback before.
It's got 3 items.
Oh, we got 2, he puts the carpets together, but there's the resurfacing. He believes we will lose some contracts if the board doesn't approve 3 items. One is the resurfacing that he has on the next level of the cycle for resurfacing parking lots. And then Athel's carpet and Betty Kiefer's Mountain View's carpet.
Mountain Views, it's parking lot resurface,
And Athel's.
and lining, and I'm assuming the parking lots is all of the parking lots?
Nope, he just has the next one on to the next agenda, the next cycle. So
Okay.
those are the only things
The
that,
next group of
yeah.
them that are supposed to be.
And then his belief is that if you could schedule a workshop with sitting in a table and talking, and he and CFO Wallace could go through and talk this through. It's a very comprehensive, intense document, and I just want to acknowledge that I really am very appreciative that the 2 of them gave up 2 days to get this together for the board. I just really thank them. I think they did a really nice service to be able to have this ready for you guys for tonight. So, thank you, Mr. Wallace.
Okay, so on the capital projects, what I don't see that wasn't uploaded was, the actual list that, we were given a few weeks back. With these are all of them, and then these are the lines these are
Yeah.
lined out, and here's your bucket.
Okay, just added it to the one that was at the one we were just talking about. Renee.
Yeah,
I don't know if that was
No,
the
that's,
one she's referring to.
no, I'm referring to the capital improvement list that Brian provided for the February and I believe January board meetings.
yes, it's that one. Yeah, and then he went through and crossed off the ones that are cleaned up.
So,
Did she add it?
She did just add a document on there.
and I
To the
okay.
plant facility.
Plant
one that
facility.
She added on there.
Yep, that's it, that took me.
Okay, so then, there were, is that 2 pages?
And just to clarify, in case it
Oh,
sounds
it is.
confusing,
Okay,
the
Yeah.
plant facility levy was expiring.
right,
Hence why he titled it plant facility, because the capital projects are the ones that are in the list that he said, this is how Mr. Ferriola and I recommend we utilize the rest of the funds.
right,
And they are they're projects that fit into that amount, so that's why it says plant facility, but we're talking the same thing.
Right, okay.
Yeah. So just in case anyone watches this
Sure,
later, that's
okay.
the clarification, is that pot of money is what they were recommending to finalize before you go out again.
okay. But it was my understanding, and it could be my mistaken understanding, that this was the list that was supposed to be approved tonight. Is that not correct?
No.
Okay,
And, well, yes and.
okay,
Really what they, the directive that we thought that we heard from the board was, here's the list we recommended, but the board tabled it and said,
Right.
we wanna have direction over where this money is going to be spent. So then, he came with that second sheet, which says, here's what we've already encumbered and spent, or contracts we've already done. Here's what still needs to be, that we recommended, but if you cross it out,
okay.
you would have the million left, or however much it was.
763.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sorry.
Close to $1 million.
Yeah, sorry, I went to the 7 million.
Over
I knew
half.
Something 7.
Almost.
And so then the board directed them, can you put together priorities for all these things
Right.
hanging out there?
Right.
So then they spent 2 full days getting the other big puppy, that's probably not what I'm supposed to call it, but that really big spreadsheet, that,
Yeah,
that is where they want you to see the big picture,
okay,
which is $28 million worth of stuff. That's where we're gonna need a workshop, but tonight, it won't use up the rest of the plant facility levy, but they really, to not lose contracts, want those 3 things that I said to be, if the board could approve those 3 things, Mr. Ferriola would be very happy. Does that clarify your question?
yes. So in looking at the lined out items on this plant facility funds project, we already approved the final 2 sessions of the, John Brown.
Yes.
Okay, so then we've got the parking lot striping at Spirit Lake, John Brown, and Timberlake Middle School, which I'm assuming that's correlating over here. Parking lot.
So see this thing, Board Chair Thompson, parking lot, seal stripe, SLE, JBE, and Timberlake Middle School, those were the ones that were on the rotation for 47,000.
Well, and he also has Ethel Elementary on here, which is fine, I'm just trying to, see, I'm looking at the spreadsheet that they sent to us via email. Because when I opened it up in Board Doc,
Yeah,
I
it
was
was
like,
too many
"Ooh,
pages."
I can't
I
see.
shared the document with you.
Yeah,
Dr. Mayor, could I just clarify that the items that are not crossed out have already been
Yes.
approved and or contracted for?
Yes.
Mhm.
Or completed already,
Or completed?
yeah.
So from the cross out line of
Yeah.
maintenance down.
Now, to
Those
Board
are-
Chair
those are
Thompson's
optional
point,
ones.
you guys, the board did approve these final 2 sections at the board meeting last week.
yeah,
So that part now is already
So
done.
that one's done?
Yes.
so
And
to
then they're
speak.
wanting the next.
Yeah, he wants this 47,000 and the 120. These next 2 items, he would like those approved.
And the others that we see fit to approve.
Exactly, and
I was gonna say, I don't know that it was necessary to go through and like cross those out when that was, I mean, I understand that the directive was to see what we absolutely.
And ones that are time sensitive are the things that he said. The other ones, he's happy to have come to a workshop to where you can ask more questions about the big puppy that they gave to you this afternoon.
Well,
Cause you're gonna need time to digest that for sure.
personally, I would favor approving some more, because I see some things on there that are gonna take some time to get contract ready, I think. For example, and maybe Brian can clue us in a little bit, but you got HVAC upgrades at the central kitchen, and the original system was not very good, because I used to be there many years ago.
Yeah, and that actually from this time, Mike has actually been working with contractor, and that 90 we may be able to significantly reduce that. But part of that cost is we thought we were gonna have to take that unit off the roof.
Yeah,
Which is, I mean, that thing is, that's the biggest,
it's gigantic.
yeah, that thing is just a monster.
I know.
So a lot of the costs are really demo costs. And you couldn't get parts for it. Well, now they're looking at, they can maybe end up putting, you know, replace some of the parts, heating units that can work and be able to effectively refurbish that unit in a sense, or at least use the space and not have to take it off. And if that's the case, then the cost for that would be significantly less. But Mike is still working on that, because we were just saying there has to be a better way than getting a crane and taking this off that roof, because that's literally what it would be.
Right.
So,
I see an item.
so that would be less, but I mean, so I think that actually that would come in significantly less. So we're talking in, you know, maybe down to 20,000 as opposed to 90. The main gym HVAC replacement at THS, that's really trying to be more proactive. We know at some point it's gonna go. Right now it's fine, it could last, you know, a few more years. You just don't wanna, when it goes, though it goes.
Or another week.
Or, well, right, maybe it'll just go in August, and then it's fine.
Yeah.
And then you have
We
to.
don't need
fix
to
it
heat.
before
No,
we-
anyway. And again, the same thing with the gym heaters at Athol and SLE. We just know those are, you know, getting near their end of life. You can see them and just sort of, at some point, you know, they very light go near, but they're getting more difficult to find parts for that equipment.
But there is more detail on the one they shared with today, and he just thinks it's gonna take some time to digest. The bleachers has been a discussion that's come up several times, and that's all on there. So,
But see, I see HVAC needs very close to roofing needs. You know, when the roof leaks, then you suffer damage
Yep.
inside. When the HVAC quits, you don't have any heat. It gets very cold in those buildings this time of year. You know, so you don't want to. It's kind of like you don't want that tire to go flat because you don't have a
Yep.
spare.
Yeah,
And so
I
you need
totally
to buy a
agree.
new tire so you don't have that problem.
yep.
Mr. Wallace, is any of this, can we use COVID money for any of this, being that it's HVAC and there was a provision for that with the COVID?
Probably on some
the
of that,
lesser dollars?
You know, Trustee Grissom, we would need to get first approval from the state. So for any capital projects with COVID dollars, you have to get approval at that level. And I know I don't think that would be an issue. We just have to describe the project and the need and how it fits in COVID. And once you get that formal approval, then we'd probably have to get new quotes. Because the vendors would have to, some of those costs would probably raise some. They, you know, because of the federal with the contracting, they have to pay prevailing wage.
Right.
And so as a general rule, you could probably figure at least their install costs are going to be another probably 20-25% is.
Right.
they
I
get
guess
to
my
us.
thought is that money is a provision for that thing, right, which is extra, I guess you'd call it. Whereas the levy money is for, the, maintenance and repair of these items. And I'm thinking that 190, 200 and some odd $1,000, if we could get that covered, regardless of what it is of the COVID money, then we would have that much more to actually put into the buildings, like the doors at the junior high. Or some of the other things that we see that we might need at the buildings, or going over Mr. Furiola's list, or the list that you two made, I guess, on the maintenance schedule. That's just my thought, that maybe we can get even more if we move some of it to the COVID money. And I understand it would be more, but the provision is in there for that. Whereas this money here for the levy, I would like to see some more personal things done for the schools. And I know we have to do what we can do, based upon priority and what's actually going on, but that would, I would like to see us do that, when it comes to the HVAC and those types of things, that actually use because they said in there, that we could do that, so.
Yeah, there's nothing,
Yeah.
we could certainly do that if that's, the ESSER $3 is really the next big pot that we're gonna have to work with. And there is a chunk of that that's dedicated to learning loss, so we can't use that. But then the larger allocation, this definitely fits within that if that's what we wanna do. There's, we haven't gone too in depth on that. I could let Dr. Meyer discuss.
Well, I know there was one specifically in the COVID that specifically outlined any kind of HVAC need.
Oh, yeah,
Okay.
definitely we can do that.
Okay.
There's just I think what he's trying to say is there's some hoops to jump through,
Sure.
and then the prevailing wage may
Right.
cause it to be about 40% or more.
Sure.
So if we use the ESSER dollars for staffing, which is a 1-to-1 ratio, it would free up some general fund to do whatever the priorities that the board wants. I think that's what he was trying to say.
Was that what you were trying to say?
Well, that's one way that you can approach it. So we can spend the ESSER dollars on, multiple uses. Staffing is one, and HVAC projects, custodial, support, and cleaning buildings and things like that. So there's a lot of uses. So, one thing that some districts are doing is they're, finding allowable uses of the ESSER dollars that might have been paid through the general fund, and the general fund has a little bit more money in it at the end because you didn't spend it out of the general fund. You claimed those dollars, those ESSER dollars, and then they have a little capacity in the general fund, then using those for a project because you have the dollars, right? So it's sort of, there's a lot of ways I guess we can approach this. I have no problem using the ESSER dollars, but like for the ESSER 3, just, as the district, we haven't, we had not anticipated drawing down any of those dollars until next fiscal year. So we really haven't had in-depth conversations on how we might use those dollars. And that is the biggest COVID dollars of the allocations of all three. That's the largest amount.
And was that the one that specifically stated the ventilation or the HVAC
I think so.
provision?
Like ESSER 1, you couldn't have done that, but ESSER 3, you can. Yeah, the rules. Well, and maybe I don't know, Trustee. ESSER 1 had like 14 allowable uses.
Yeah, 12, and then it went to 14, and then 15.
And then 15. So they kept adding it.
Okay.
And the only thing I'm saying is, I don't want to spend more taxpayer dollars than we need to get a service or something done that if we have money in the general fund to do it, and the staffing can come out of it as a 1-to-1 ratio. Do you know what I'm saying?
Right, no, I get that.
I want to be completely transparent. I just want to spend the least amount of taxpayer dollars on a project that we can legally do.
Right,
I
I
would-
get that, however, those dollars are federal taxpayer dollars, they weren't Idaho, I
Mhm.
mean, we were all in the same pot, right? And they were given, where this is actually, this money we're talking about is our own
Yep.
district
Yep.
people that voted,
Yep.
and they still have issues that have not been resolved. So I'm trying to fix what we need to fix
Yep.
and try and give the constituents what they would like to see also, you know, within reason. I mean, I know there's other things that, you know, the general
Well,
public's
to
not
your
aware
point from
of,
the
and-
accountability report, the only thing that we have left that we have to finish is Mountain View, which is being worked on right now. But from what we promised the voters with the plant
Right.
facility levy, we are coming close to fruition of completing all of those projects.
Right.
There, to your point, there was some that I did put in the accountability report in the past years that were not able to be done because of the roof emergency, but we are working on Mountain View right now.
Yeah, yeah.
So-
Oh, yeah, and I know that, I'm just talking
Yeah.
about the expectation of the community and the continual, dissatisfaction with the
Mhm.
way the buildings look
Yeah.
and that
Yeah.
type of thing.
Yes, absolutely, and the doors, you guys
Yeah.
do keep hearing about but they do hear about patron feedback on the doors at Lakeland Middle School.
Yeah.
They need to be addressed, and that is on the bigger, that's not on this list, but it is on that bigger list that you got today.
Yeah, so I was trying to juggle
No,
all
I hear-
the-
I hear what you're
think
saying.
the point is well taken, but from
Yeah.
a slightly different perspective, and that is, number one, in the budget, if you look at the budget, we actually have some dollars in the ESSER fund set aside for capital expenditure.
Mhm.
So theoretically, you should be using it for that.
Yeah.
Secondly, these ESSER monies are one-time monies.
Right,
You don't wanna be dedicating those to ongoing expenses.
Right.
no,
Because you
absolutely.
build a trap for yourselves at some point in the future if you do
Yeah,
that.
no, I get that,
So,
yeah.
you know, some of those dollars have to be spent that way.
Sure,
And, you know, so you're gonna comply with that, but
Yeah,
by the same token, there's
yeah,
a word of caution to be
yeah, absolutely.
looked
Yeah,
at.
yeah.
And
But
like the
that's-
HVAC
I would favor going ahead with any of those, particularly those HVAC projects, and using the ESSER funds.
Yeah, I mean, we can certainly write up the descriptions to the State Department and get their approval, then ask for updated quotes that would reflect, prevailing wage. They may not be significant, they may be, it really depends how much labor's involved.
sure, yeah,
Mhm.
right. Yeah, so the roof maintenance, the parking lot seal stripe and the carpet replacement are of the utmost importance. We need to
Tonight, yeah.
give them that okay, so.
Yeah,
they
he
can
would be
afford it.
really
Okay.
appreciative if the board could just do that
Yeah.
minimum tonight.
Okay, and then the HVAC, we can,
Why would we wait if we can go ahead? with
Oh,
it?
I'm not trying, I'm just telling you what
I
Mr.
understand,
Fairweather
I
said, but
understand.
whatever the
I do have a
board's.
question about the one at Timberlake High School. That's a relatively new building, and you're looking at replacement of that HVAC.
Just heard the gym, yeah. You know, Mike has told me that right now that, you know, Ken and him, they fight with that. And that it is at least the equipment that was bought, it's near its end of life.
Yeah, it was 20 years old.
Yeah, so then I think the unit they bought at the time, it's right around there, and it's, I mean, he's been concerned, he said they're getting it along, but he just
So
thinks
it
at
would
some point.
It would be a wholesale take out and replace. type
Yeah,
of-
this is a replacement of that unit, so it would,
So we understand.
yeah.
And it's just for the gym, not the
Correct.
entire school? Okay.
Yeah, and the other, part, like for, you know, the high school, you know, their boilers and then their, you know, heat pumps and how they're heating that building is, you know, the individual classrooms, so like that, you know, that's keeping up on the preventative maintenance. Those systems are in, you know, good shape.
Okay, now I have to ask you about Athol Spirit Lake. As I recall, those are individual room units, most of them?
Those are, yes, just the gym heaters. There's those big ones that.
Oh, you're talking about the gym heaters?
Correct.
Okay.
Just the gym heaters.
All right, I got it. Thank you.
We're guessing on those, it'd be a little bit, we would wanna control them, they're not controlled right now. But that each one's probably around 42,000 or so.
Yeah.
Maybe not.
You know, roughly with, But it would be, and that would be a similar thing. They would be, a newer unit would not be as loud. Like the Spirit Lake one is loud. We have our PE teachers have good lungs and voices. They sure, but when those things are running, they're pretty loud.
Yeah.
At least the older ones.
Okay, all right, good, thank you.
Well, yeah, no, on your list you have replace gym heater for Athol Elementary 35 and then replace independent heating units for 12. And that's a #1 priority as well.
Oh, on the big list?
On the
Yeah, on the big list. So when we looked at that big list, and that's why, this could be a big conversation.
Right.
We were looking at, by building, by system, or by area, however you want to call it, items that, we see every day that are sort of ongoing that we would need to replace. And a one is some, relatively, that's going to have to need very soon, or it's a higher priority. And we only looked about 10 years out. So if a roof had a 30-year warranty and we just put it on, we didn't put it on the list because we're assuming that's going to be good. So we know that on some of these units, like it's happening now, but we just put it on the list. Like right now, we've replaced 3 or 4 heaters between John Brown and Lakeland Middle School that are like either a univent or a wall pack, and they're about $5,000.
Mm-hmm.
So we just put that in the list saying that we could have not, because we're going to do it, we're going to keep but to let you know that every year a couple go out and we have to replace them.
Right.
So that's sort of what that was as a one, but we wanted to reflect the cost.
Okay.
And then in those older buildings, then we said that, at some point, if you wanted to really, put in more of a modern system, heat pumps with ventilation and bringing in air and the air handlers and all that, and maybe even put a chiller in the school, that's a renovation project in significant dollars, and probably would have to be associated with a bond, but we wanted to sort of show,
Okay.
if you had, if you had a outside consultant architectural firm come in and say, what do you need to be done at the junior high or John Brown, that they're going to recommend that, and it would be a big ticket item.
Did we ever get a report on the maintenance that you and Mr.
Oh,
Perry-
the condition? Yeah, Architects was working on it. I think I might get something this week.
Okay.
But yeah, so when I get that, we'll definitely share at the next available board meeting. It should be here fairly soon. They contacted me last week saying that they needed a few more days.
Okay. Because it would be nice to have their insights and see how that's comparing along with our.
Right, they didn't do
intentions.
this type of level of analysis. They did our building condition evaluation on a sort of scoring format, and a format that that we've used as a district and is similar to what has been used in other Idaho school districts, called it a building condition evaluation form. So they're sort of using rating a building on a scale up to 100.
Right.
But they didn't get to the level of doing dollars.
No,
and things
I
like that.
understand that, but if it
Right.
comes back to where 1, 2, or 4 of our schools are very low at the bottom of the barrel, I would think we would be more prudent in focusing a little bit more attention to bringing those schools up, is
Oh.
just my thought.
Oh, no,
So-
absolutely, Chair Thompson.
Okay.
And we know that our 4 buildings, and well, if you take Mountain View's had
That
some.
was just arbitrary numbers,
But-
it wasn't.
No, but we have 4 buildings that were built in the 1960s,
Mhm.
and those are the ones that have the most needs.
Okay. So I do think it would be beneficial for us to contemplate having, or not contemplate, but to have a meeting with Mr. Ferriola and over all the projects that need to be done. I don't know if anybody else feels that same way. Just to get a better understanding of the significant dollar value that needs to go into some of these buildings. But with respect to that, we do need to approve capital projects for tonight. So would we like to have more conversation on the capital projects list? Where were we at on that? would like to have more conversation on the capital projects.
I don't have any more at this time, I don't know if anybody else does. I agree with your suggestion that we have some kind of a workshop or something to,
During the roundtable discussion.
yeah.
Well, that being said, were you gonna say something?
Mm-mm.
Okay. I'll entertain a motion regarding the capital projects.
Madam Chairman, I would move that we approve the following projects. The parking lot seal and stripe for $47,000, the carpet replacement at Apple and Mountain View for $120,000, the HVAC upgrade at the central kitchen for $90,000, the main gym HVAC at Timberlake High School for $100,000, and the gym heaters and controls at Athol and Spirit Lake Elementary for $85,000. The last three to be taken from ESSER funds with state approval.
Okay, do we have a motion?
That was his motion. I'll second it.
No, I said we have a
Oh,
motion.
oh, I thought you said, do
was
we have a
fishing
motion?
for a
I was like,
second.
wow.
No.
Yeah.
I was trying to fish for a second to avoid the long pauses.
I will second.
Hearing a motion and a second, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries. Okay, would we like to go down to appointing the treasurer, or go back up to the plant facility levy?
You wanna go back?
Go back up?
Yeah.
And we'll go back up. Okay, so we're going back up to the plant facility levy. This was asked to be brought back up to us.
Okay, and I thank you for reversing that. I think it's helpful to see the information that we got from that report, and I would certainly commend Ryan and Mr. Ferriola for the work that they've done. I know it's a huge piece of work to reach out and go through every building and to try to figure out exactly what the needs, and then to put a priority on it is even more difficult sometimes. And so, you know, there's some subjectivity in that, obviously. But they're on the ground every day. They have a better feel, I think, for those kind of things than anyone else would, so I appreciate that effort. And I think that list is a strong indicator of, you know, why I asked for the discussion on the plant facilities levy. Plant facilities levy has been in the district historically for many, many years. We used to run it for 10 years at a time, so you didn't have to worry about frequent renewal that way. The problem with that is that when you get to the end of the 10-year cycle, if you've had much inflation and during that period your spending power is significantly diminished. I think that's one reason why the district began to pare that back over time. But it is an important source of funds for capital improvements, and you can see by the dollar amount of some of these projects that you have to have a significant amount of capital available in order to accomplish those kind of things over time. I've spent a little time with the superintendent and Mr. Wallace trying to understand the rationale, I guess, behind the earlier decision to forego renewing the plant facilities levy, and I think I comprehend it. But I don't agree with it, to be quite honest. And I'll try to give you some rationale from my point of view. Number one, besides the fact that you really need to have those dollars in place, if you choose to forego that and those dollars drop off, then you have no guarantee of when or how you're going to get them back in the future. Now, I know that one of the concerns is always, and I certainly remember this as a superintendent, running multiple levies at one time in the same year, for example. If if you get into a pattern where you have to run a supplemental and plant facility levy the same year, you know, that's a tougher sell than either one or the other. And so, you know, my thinking is to try to work out a lack of a better term, a rotation pattern where you're renewing, you know you're gonna renew the supplemental every 2 years. You're kind of locked into that going forward, you know. And I would say that as we move forward with that, we really should be looking at paring that back from the current level. And maybe even the same with the plant facility levy. But to run the plant facility levy on a year that you're not running the supplemental, I think is important to being able to pass either one. And so this is the year that would need to happen. Otherwise, you're going to be 2 more years down the road in order to avoid, you know, the supplemental and the plant facility in the same year. Now you can do that, but I just know from experience that that's a hard sell. So that's part of my concern. And I guess if I were to make a suggestion at this point that, you know, that we rethink that and approve running a plant facility levy this year, that'd be for 6 years as opposed to 5. And the reason for that is what I just went through, and that is that it cycles later on in between the supplemental levies approvals. And the other thing that happens, if you look at it, if you run after 6 years, there will be 2 years in that interim where no levy would be run because the supplemental is every other year. Those would be the potential years to run a bond levy if you're gonna try to do that. Because I don't need to tell these folks it's a lot of work to run a bond election. And it's critical that you be able to devote all your time and attention and effort into passing that, because that requires that old 2/3. Getting 2/3 of the people to agree the sun's going to come up tomorrow sometimes is tough. And so, you know, that's really, really important. But I just have a real concern that if we don't do that, that plant facility levy drops off. Well, there's kind of a plan put together to sort of bridge that gap, so to speak. That's the term that I've heard. But it's going to bridge it right into the period of time when you have to run that supplemental. And if you lose either one of those, you have big problems. And I'm concerned about plotting a strategy for the long-term financial stability of the district. And that's, you know, I may not have the only ideas about how to do that, but that's my concern. And so that's why I asked for some discussion about it.
And that was 1.147 per year, is that?
1.146.
6,
Yeah.
okay.
Well,
So that would be 5.6 million over a 5-year period.
and I guess I would have maybe people look at the voter approval recently, because when you look at, we passed the last plant facility and instructional levy together, near 70%. We only passed the last instructional levy at 42, and there's such thing as voter fatigue, which I think supersedes the need for every year to go out to, it takes a lot of personnel time for people to go out and do awareness, money for campaigns, and it's not the way it used to be, even just from 3-4 years ago. So I guess I would just caution the board before you make any final decisions is to be looking throughout the area on voter campaigns and doing every year versus really going out to the public and making them aware of what we need and putting it all together so that they aren't voting for something every single year. I feel like the community has, at least to us, has voiced loud and clear, like we don't want to keep going back to the polls every year. So that's just something I think we need to ask the patrons about before we were to go forward with something for this year. I feel like it's way too late, in my opinion, for us to do that right now. So.
Well, and I know that the board, at the time had a large discussion over the plant facility levy. And the concern was we only passed the last, levy at 42 votes, not even a percentage, it was the number of votes. And at that time, there was concern it wasn't even gonna pass because there was so much, frustration with the patrons and the constituents that, you know, why are we constantly asking for more money? And then again, you know, we're telling them, we don't have money, but yet we do have money, and it's just, it's for as transparent as we try to be, it doesn't always appear that we're being transparent. And my biggest concern is the outcry that we had from the last election. I didn't feel that it would be beneficial for the district to keep trying to go back for more in such a short amount of time.
And that's a valid point, and certainly today is not the same as it was 5 years ago or 20 years ago with respect to the demographics and the population that we have in the school district.
Correct.
And that has to be taken into account. I would suggest, however, that, you know, maybe I heard something a little different from voters than what you just described, and that is the amounts that have been asked for didn't always balance with the current financial situation in the district. And so, you know, the questions I got is, why did they need that much?
Mm-hmm.
Not the need didn't exist, and people recognized the need and the importance of supporting the school district, but the question was more, why that much? And so we've got to be able to deal with that issue. Part of that, I think, goes back, and I don't want to drag up old history, but you know, this cycle kind of began when the bond election failed so miserably. And frankly, the district lost some credibility,
Right.
And some trust with voters in that process. It takes a long time to rebuild that. And that's one of the reasons I suggested going forward, we need to look at paring back the supplemental and maybe even the plant facilities levy this next round to show a good faith effort to the voters that we're making, you know, a concerted effort to try to reduce expenditures when we can, but we do have needs, and we need to demonstrate those needs and put those out there, and I think people will respond to that.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of that. I think that also on top of that, that what we've been running up against is that the people in the district look at, and I know none of this happens overnight and I'm not pointing fingers, but they look at the condition of the buildings within the district, and they say, you know, you have, and I know we can't spend the money anywhere we want to spend the money, right? But they look at it and say, well, we just gave you so much, and you know, the bathroom still doesn't work, the paint's peeling off, the sign, I mean, those are, you know, they look at those things on a daily basis, and I agree. I don't know how we fix their concerns, right? New paint jobs, right? Fix a sign, make a bathroom work, whatever, and gain their trust again, because I agree, where else are we gonna get the money, right? We know at the end of the year, we've seen with the budget before that even the fund balance gets drawn way down just to make it until, you know, to bridge the summer basically. Oh, I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to get the plant facilities levy, actually hear what the constituents are saying and use the funds for those actual things that they have concerns about. I mean, we know the roof's falling in, the, you know, HVAC has to be fixed, all those, but somehow we have to figure out to show good faith to them also that those things that they see and are concerned about are being done. You know, I know there's a lot of complaints about the visual appearance of Apple Elementary, John Brown Elementary, Spirit Lake. I don't hear so much about visual appearance, but I do. Yeah, the other things, you know, and I know paint doesn't keep us warm or cool or whatever, right, but it is important to them.
It is important. It's one of those situations where perception is a greater part of
Yes.
reality.
Right.
Absolutely.
And it kind of reminds me of something that happened a number of years ago before Dr. Meyer was here. There was a different superintendent at the time who followed me, and the lawns at the high school were burning up. You know, they just really looked tough, you know, and I said to him at the time, I said, you know, people drive by that every day, and they see that. And sooner or later, you're gonna go out and ask them for some more money to do some things. And people are gonna react, if you don't take care of what you have, why would we give you more money to do the same?
Right.
So that's the kind of thing we have to overcome, and that's exactly what you're suggesting,
Yeah.
I think, yeah.
Yeah.
And that's very true, and I've heard some of those same reports.
Yeah.
I do think that, you know, this laundry list of stuff that we got a glimpse of tonight, suggests that, you know, there are all kinds of needs out there, including the routine maintenance kinds of
Right.
things. And we have to be able to demonstrate that and discuss that with the public in a way that they can, you know, accept it and understand it and know that we're gonna go ahead and do something about those things. But
Well,
you
and
gotta
even
have, you
just-
gotta have the money to do it, that's the
Right,
whole thing.
Right.
Right.
Even just having this list is, you know, just a good visual to say, there are so many things that need to be done, and it's, you know, each project, big or small, is important.
And we can, maybe not 100%, but to some degree, let's say for the sake of discussion, we approve a 6-year plant facilities levy. And we have this list, and over that 6-year period, we can design a plan to spend so much each year to take care of those needs based on a priority that we've built.
Address, yeah.
Mhm.
And that's
put
like
that out- and put
that's
that out
almost
to
like a
public.
good start to a long range plan.
yeah.
You know, just looking at those priorities and knowing that you have to do the preventative maintenance too. You can't just go in panic mode and emergency fixes on everything. But I think it is a good, you know, just seeing that laundry list of stuff that needs to be done district wide.
I do want to say, because none of you were on the board, and so 6 years ago, I do want it on record, and I do want everyone to know, we did have a plan, so this isn't like, I just want it, because it sounds like from the discussion like we didn't have a plan. When we passed the plant facility levy for a 10-year, it was itemized out. This is what we want to get done over 10 years, and we've stuck to that except for when we had a roof emergency at 2 different buildings, that we had a roof emergency that had to be fixed. We're transparent with the voters, but no matter how transparent and communicative you are, people still are only looking at like, well, my things aren't fixed at my school where my kids go. And I understand that no matter how much I put out there, and we were trying to be very communicative, people still, to your point, when they drop their kids off, they see their spot. But I do want the public to know, we did have a plan. We didn't just ask for the 1.146 for 10 years and didn't have 5 years, sorry, 5 years and didn't have a plan. We did have it, and we are coming to fruition on that. But what I do hear you saying is we need to go to the next, like you're not agreeing with the philosophy to use ESSER funds, because we do have, you know, a big chunk of ESSER funds, around 4 million that doesn't have to be in the learning loss category, that could be, to your point, Trustee Grissom, and again, this was my philosophy, it doesn't mean the board has to agree, but that we bridge the year and put them, I think the voters would have a better appetite, and maybe we need to do a survey, but the voters would have a better appetite for it to be all at one time. This is what we need with plant facilities, this is our instructional. You can see from the levy rate, Mr. Wallace already said we're down to 2.25. The highest when we very first passed the instructional levy, when I first got here, that very first one on March 27, we were at $4.53. We're all the way down to $2.25, and the next bond's going to be coming off. The plant facility levy is going to be coming off, and it is going down. So I think the opportunity, in my opinion, is ripe to start the discussions with the community now. Here's our big list. Have little meetings. You folks have talked about going to your areas and talking to the public face to face, doing the presentations and giving time to build up the community support, the trust, doing tours, and having the opportunity to say, this is what we're gonna come to the public for, and we are being conscientious with your taxpayer dollars. In my opinion, that's the way to build that trust back up again that you've all heard that has been eroded from prior. So,
Yeah, I don't think anybody here thinks that there was no plan. The thing is, we're discussing is trying, like you're saying, is trying to overcome the perception,
yeah,
right? And
Yeah.
continue to maintain the building. That's
yeah.
where,
I said it more for the
That's-
public, I just,
Oh.
in case people watch this,
uh,
sometimes they don't have the context of it, I wanna make sure they, because there aren't a lot of them sitting here, so if they are choosing to watch it later,
right.
I want them to know that piece of it.
And certainly, that was not my suggestion.
No.
The district hadn't planned. In fact, I would just share with the rest of the board, I've taken a fairly detailed look at how much effort the district is putting into maintenance, and I can tell you on a dollar level, the district budgets way more than what the state minimum requires for maintenance and improvement. And so I think the district has made a good effort in that regard. Now, it doesn't go far enough sometimes in order to get everything done that we'd like to get done, and so we gotta figure out some ways to do that. But it's not for lack of effort. I would
Right.
certainly credit the district for that.
I think we have to have a workshop just with you, Trustee Jones, so you can share all the knowledge you've gained with all your meetings. When do we have to have this? It would run next year, next March,
Are you speaking of
for
when,
the plant facility levy. When would we have to let the clerk know?
it depends what voter date, you have the four dates that you can choose
Right.
from. And I think that's gonna take some board discussion to say, cause obviously he has a different, I think some discussion, different philosophy. Other board members may have heard from their constituents, I have a thought, maybe CFO Wallace might have a thought. I think definitely the board needs to consider all the different kind of perspectives, cause that's a big decision, whether it's August, November, or the next March or May.
It kind of keys on when you can get the levy certified if it's approved, right?
Correct. So the timelines for the May election, which is coming up here in May, you would have to have the ballot question submitted to the county on March 18th. For the August election, the submission deadline is July 11th. And then you'd have that election's on August 30th. If you could, at that point, you could ask for an extension from the county to certify your L2, they call it, for property tax collections, so you could get in the next calendar year. After that, it's the November election, and I think at that point it has to be sometime in September, would be my guess. I'm looking, I have the schedule up here, that's why I sort of brought my laptop. Ballot question submission is September 9th for the November election, and then those timelines are very similar. For the March election, it's near in January sometime for next year. So it's,
And it expires this coming year, correct? This coming March, is that correct?
It's-
2023?
With the tax collection in the June, so this is the last year that we have it.
Okay.
yeah, the collections are sort of calendar year, but yeah, so
Okay.
the end of June, that would be
Our last collection.
our last collection.
Okay. And then Mr. Jones, I saw you, Trustee Jones, November, you shook your head.
I would avoid November if it were me. First of all, I'm not sure how close you can get, whether or not you can still certify it the following November.
No, November would, if you did run it then, you wouldn't be
Be
doing it, it's
year
for the
following.
next year.
Yeah, so you lose
Still
a full
lose a
year.
year, yeah.
That's
Correct.
the basic reason for it.
Okay.
Is part of your consideration that you want to run it sooner rather than waiting until March of 2023? Trustee Wallace, who's made this known like 26 times, that he's concerned about the levy rate going so low that once it's off the books, that folks, even with great awareness and a campaign to understand, will not want to raise the rate again. Is that part of your concern?
Yeah, it really is, because if you drop the plant facilities, you drop that piece of the total rate off, And then, in 23, you're gonna have one of the bond issues that drops off. A couple of years later, the other one drops off. And so pretty soon you're down to whatever the supplemental is. And the rate at that point,
Yeah, unless you increase that by the plant and put it together.
But on the other hand, I would tell you that, there's a lot of talk about rate, and I know from being a school administrator for a long time, you talk about levy rate, but when I talk to people on the street,
Mhm.
they worry more about what the dollars of their tax bill are than the rate of the tax bill.
Which Board Chair Thompson shared with us her tax bill, and that was her concern, was she didn't look at the rate, but her actual amount.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons I suggest, in order to help with the perception that the public has, we need to bring the dollar amounts down if we can.
I agree, yeah.
I just will remind people
I know.
that, I just want it on record that we do, but then we also have, the board did create a policy before you two came on about their class sizes they would like to see. And we are using some ESSER dollars right now to help the unfinished learning to keep lower class sizes that we're supplementing. It's one-time money, so that is a piece. We have Armed Guards program that we have put into place. We have extracurriculars. There's things that we have in place that we have just been holding still. We didn't even add on the percentage until the very last levy. For 2 cycles of 8.99, the board did allow us to do a cost of living and put it, CFO Wallace put in just a nominal amount of cost of living, and they went up to 9.52, which was not even keeping with inflation. So I just want to make that out there, that it's easy to say let's lower it, but you have to look at what we're actually, the public is getting in this community for that, and decide what comes off the plate if we're going to lower the amount.
Yeah, and then it wasn't a cost of living. What we did was had Piper, Jeffries, I think, look at,
Right.
because the complaint from the constituents is that they're tired of paying for all the new population. So we looked at, here's the growth in the district that would equate to this amount of money. That's where the difference.
Yeah, thank you.
came.
That's
Yeah.
correct.
Yeah.
Thank you for clarifying that. That's exactly what it was.
And I appreciate your comments,
Yeah.
Dr. Meyer. I understand from a school
I know you do.
administrator standpoint, you have to advocate as much as you can for that direction. We as a board, I think,
Yeah.
have to balance all of that with
Yeah.
everything else that's out there. with our
I'm trying to
public.
protect you also from the constituents, because when we had to put the upper quartile ALP program on hold because of the 6% holdback, these 3 had a lot of feedback from families, like, why did this have to go on hold, and where's the certain programs, and we didn't do certain things. These 3 heard about it, and so I'm not attached to the outcome. I'm just wanting to make sure the board has all the information before they make a decision.
It's all a matter of setting priorities.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just more than, we've only been talking about a lot of facilities. I just kind of wanted to put in the other part about, we have other programs and services that we've put in, FFA things, extracurricular things that we've put on that I think the voters are really liking. So I just want to make sure that part of the discussion continues, not just the facilities, which I know you're all aware of. I just want to say that out loud.
And that's part of, what we communicate to the public at large is, the district makes a concerted effort to offer all these programs. You gotta have money to do that, and you gotta have facilities to do that, and so we're into a balancing act.
Yes,
Right.
exactly. Your priorities as a board.
Right.
And there is an awareness, I'll just say this one last thing, not belabor, but there are several folks, we have heard it all firsthand, that are moving from out of state. They don't realize the awareness of what Idaho, they don't understand we're the very last in the nation. The state doesn't help, and we have to have a supermajority to be able to pass a bond. That is an awareness thing, and we had people moving from other states talk to us and say, well, we don't have to pass this because the state will pay for it. Like, they don't understand the whole local control and the voters, they don't understand. So there's a big awareness thing that we know is on our plate. We have all talked about that as a group. So we know we need to do that.
I know sometimes there's a misconception, my brain thought, right or wrong, is that I have, you know, sometimes the constituents say, well, you guys passed this. No, in my brain says, we brought the question to you, and the question is yay or nay. Do you wanna have it, or do you, I mean, that's really how I see the board, whether that's sometimes not understood by the public, but I see it that it's the board's just saying, do we wanna bring the question to the voters, or do we not wanna bring, I mean, really, because really they get no say unless they're brought the question, right, of passing it or not passing it.
Right.
So that's the way I see it. Otherwise they have no say in any of it, they can't, I mean, they can't, you know, look for a solution if they're never posed the question,
Right.
for what needs to be done, so.
And it's a matter of, you know, when, you know, whether you're doing supplementals or plant facilities or bond election, you have to have a good demonstrated need. If you can't demonstrate need, you can't sell what you're trying to ask for. And so, you know, I think the district can do that partly, you know, from things that Dr. Meyer just described, and a lot of other things as well. But historically, the district has been very careful not to ask for way more than what you need.
Right.
That's a turning point for a lot of people. If you can demonstrate that you have a serious need, people will generally respond to that pretty well. But they're quick to say, you know, this is way beyond what we need, and no, we're not gonna do that.
Right.
Dave's back is bothering him, that's why.
No, I understand that.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity to have some discussion of this thing.
Well, we did also have it as an action item, so if you want to, contemplate a motion regarding that, please feel free, but please wait for Mr. Quimby to come back. But yeah, it's, levies are a touchy subject with respect to the culture that's right now.
So if the board contemplated bringing the levy, do you see the current levy amount, for the plant facility, do you see that, as sufficient, or that amount
Well,
to get through this?
it's always a case where, you know, if you have funds, you'll find a place to spend them.
Right.
But on the other hand, I think the greater concern at this point in time is to work on this long-term strategy of rebuilding faith and credibility with our public. I think if I were to make a motion, I would probably make a motion to set the levy at $1 million, which is down 140-some thousand, I think.
147.
And I would probably suggest August.
Okay.
Because we're too close for March.
Yeah, for the sake of our personnel, we're gonna have to deal with putting it all
Right.
together.
Yeah. We have some.
Get the school year over with, and then we got a little time to breathe.
I will, and I'm not trying to be argumentative, Trustee Jones, I'm just giving as much information to the board as possible, is, in our feedback after the bond did not pass when we ran it in August, there was a lot of feedback that we got, that we were trying to slip it in because people were gone, and that the summer was not, they did not feel like that was a good time for us to run it. They felt like it was really, underhanded, that's the word I'm looking for. That's a lot of the feedback that, we received for the August vote.
And I heard that, yes. And, you know, I think that could be overcome, but you know, I'm perfectly open. I mean, to run it in May is fine as far as I'm concerned, but
Brian,
I'm just concerned about
by chance,
stretching everybody.
do you have the ability to give a total, not right at this moment, but on categories 1 through 10, like for the projects that, repair maintenance projects that are listed in category 1, what is that total? For those in category 2, what is that total? Because if we're gonna consider the plant facilities levy at 1 million, I'd like to know that within those categories of priorities, that's gonna touch it. I would assume it would, but I don't know, because I have a whole bunch of dollar values, but can you total those? And
Yes,
send
they're
that
in
out to us?
a spreadsheet, and so we can subtotal by category and things like that. And yeah, I remember and some of these things when we said it was a category 1, we knew putting in that the ones are gonna be more than we could afford, just so you know. So when we say, we look, for example, you talked about the Athol Elementary siding, we rated that as a 1.
Right.
When you look at a project like that, at just the siding's probably, you know, $300,000 to $400,000 is what quotes would come in right now. And then when you do a project like that, and you're going into an older building and you're starting to rip and tear, there
More
can be,
things pop up.
the things can pop up. So often when you do a project like that, you might say, well, now maybe we should, while we're there, let's replace the doors. While we're there, let's replace the single pane windows
Right.
that are not energy efficient. Well, now we're getting up to $600,000, $700,000, $800,000 project. That's getting past really aggressive maintenance and really sort of like a renovation project. And that's, I think, when you look at the siding of the 4 older buildings, every building that you guys mentioned were my 1960s buildings that I mentioned. So that's really the challenge, is that with all the needs, and you're saying, oh no, we replace that siding and go, but boy, we're gonna open up that can of worms and really get in where now we have to direct everything that way because of when you get into it, and you don't know until you get there sometimes. So, I mean, so just so you know, the ones are gonna be more than just $1 million when we looked at some of these things.
Well, there are
With these-
some in the 3s and the 4s
3.271.
and
Okay,
5s.
there you go.
But there's some in the 3s, 4s, and 5s categories that are also, this is getting into the notes where this is getting into more of a building renovation. Cost is, you know, rough estimate, and
Correct.
I get all of that, but to me, it's a little easier to have, you know, hey, Apple, this is what we're looking at to help you get through.
Yeah, so the data we have, so we can, it's in the spreadsheets, and we did even share the spreadsheet, so you can look at it by, you can filter on priority, you can do subtotals by category, by building, and, you know, we can run all those. So, I mean, I think that would be if we did do a workshop, we could actually run some of those things on the fly if you want to look at those dollars. If you want specific info, I can certainly get those totals easily with our rough estimates.
There's kind of another piece of the long-term strategy here too, and that is, and I'm glad Brian brought that up, because there are some of those projects that are probably too heavy to lift just with plant facilities or routine maintenance kinds of things, and they may actually need to be a part of a future bond issue. So just hypothetically, let's say that in 2 or 3 years we have another 300 kids per year. So now suddenly we're up at 600 more and 900 more than what we were a couple of years ago. So that's enough for school. And we make a determination we're going to build a new elementary school. That may be a point in time where you reach a little farther and say, okay, we're going to take care of that major need at Athol, we're going to take care of that major need at whatever school that requires that larger expenditure. There's a couple of positives to that. One is, you know, you can get to it and do those projects with the funds necessary at the time. Secondly, in terms of reaching out to our public, we're doing some things at Athol, we're going to do some things at Spirit Lake, we're going to do some things at Mountain View or wherever. So you're actually offering a piece of the pie to everybody out there as
Right.
much as possible.
Right.
And historically, we've made a concerted effort to do that over the years.
I would agree. You go around looking at all of our roofs. Okay. So would we like to continue to have more conversation on the plant facilities levy?
we need to give you a little time.
I second it.
To give you more time?
Right, well, if there's no further discussion, if anyone wants to bring forward a motion, now would be the time.
I would move the board authorize, moving forward with the plant facility levy, in the amount of $1 million. With the election to be held in May. I'm kind of asking.
Yeah, I know you have to wait for a second, but I strongly, vehemently oppose us moving forward without, I've been asking for over a year for us to have a long-range facility planning committee up again, and I think this is a much larger discussion that needs public input, needs people from each area of the community, from schools. We need to get the long-range facility planning, to your point, and we also need to be very transparent with the public and tell them, we are running a plant facility levy. I would have told everyone if I knew we were gonna run it in May this year, I would have told everybody when we started the school year, this is our plan and this is what the board is in agreement with. But to spring it on the public right now, saying we're gonna run a bond for $1 million, or
A bond.
plant facility levy in May, would, I think it would look underhanded. It would look like we are just waiting. And we can't run a successful campaign in a couple of months. It's just not. We plan for a campaign. We plan a full calendar, not a calendar year, but the school year. What are we going to run this year? And we spend hours upon hours getting things ready, putting it out there with the public, talking to schools, talking to patrons, community meetings, to spring it on the public at this late date. I think it's, knowing the tenor of the community right now, in the last election, I just don't think it's, I just really don't think it's a good idea. And I don't know if, I think it would be very difficult for our staff to get ready. I mean, we can pull things.
Well, that's why I originally suggested August, but I'm open to that.
Yeah, I think we definitely need to alert the public, but my greater recommendation is this is the plant facility levy is part of a much bigger picture in the 10-year plan that was done, and I shared that with the board. That needs to be re-looked at again, since that bond, we have cohorts in there, enrollment projections, we have facilities, we have the update from Architects West that can be put into there. A lot of great data to get a group back together to talk where are we going long term, so that we're not just nickel and diming, that we have a big comprehensive plan. And that's part of the plant facility, is the keeping up with deferred maintenance, for sure. So I agree with your philosophy. I just think we need to be really intentional and be very, I would really like to communicate with the public what the board's wishes are, so that we are out front of it and being very transparent with the public. I don't want to spring anything on them.
Well, are you open to delaying the plant facilities to 24?
The board needs to have the discussion. Our team's plan was that we would put it together and put a lower amount, not adding the full complete together, but putting it together in March of 2023.
See, if you allow discussion at this point.
Yes, we can.
The serious problem with that is that now you're going to wrap it into the supplemental, which is an every other year thing. How are you ever going to get out of that with the plant facility levy? I think that is misguided, in all honesty, to do that, because you've locked yourself into a pattern that's going to be untenable in the future.
Right, and so to your point, and that's part of the discussion we had with CFO Wallace and the rest of the district leadership team, is if there needed to be a 6-year, for instance, you at least are on the same year so that you don't get voter fatigue. To have voters go out every year, we already have a very low voter turnout, but to have voters go out and ask for something, they don't start to realize, oh, this is plant facility, this is instructional, this is a bond now for a new elementary school, and it's voter fatigue. So to put it together we had great success in March of 2017. So even if you wanted to suggest a 6-year, but then it aligns when the instructional levy is, so every year, every other year is the instructional levy, and if you wanted to go 6 years for plant facility to have more stability from your viewpoint, that is even better than going out, in my opinion, and in our team's opinion, than going out every single year. Because not only is it voter fatigue, but it also takes so many hours for personnel that we should be doing our job, that it takes a lot of hours, especially with nowadays social media, and to combat the non-facts, fake news, on the social media that people are passing along. We have to do a lot of, like, no, this is the truth, these are the facts. And so it takes a lot of personnel time to do it. And if we could concentrate that and not spread it out every single year, you get more bang for your buck out of us as well.
And that was part of the reason I suggested the 6-year, because 24 would be an off year and 26 would be an off year. But otherwise, you gotta be really careful, because at some point in there, you're gonna be confronted with the bond election issue.
Yeah.
And are you gonna pile that on in a year when you're trying to do the big thing with the combined supplemental and plant facility number? I just think that's really problematic. But
Yeah, that's why I think a big planning committee needs to look at all of that for the next 10 years, and take the last 10-year plan, update it with current data, current enrollment, the new evaluations from architects Hvac, and that get back the board put a new long-range facility planning committee to look at that.
I'm done.
Well, we do have a motion on the floor. Do we have a second? So there's no second, motion dies. Moving on to appointing the treasurer. Had lots of conversation about this. I know at the last meeting, we had appointed Ms. Hvac as the temporary treasurer. Dr. Merritt, can I have a little bit of understanding? So is it that if we do not appoint Ms. Hvac as the treasurer, she is no longer employed?
No,
Okay, so she would still retain her position in the district?
absolutely.
Okay.
What
makes
CFO
me feel a
Wallace
little
had,
better.
yeah, no, what CFO Wallace had asked is if you do appoint him as the treasurer, that she be assigned the assistant treasurer,
Mhm.
because then the warrants can stay the same and duties.
No, I just,
then-
at our last board meeting, it was brought up, by Mr. Jones about her longevity, and then,
Yeah.
and so I got the impression, and I had heard that if we don't reappoint her, then she's out of a job, but I don't recall her being hired as a treasurer. So I was just curious, and I wanted to
No,
clarify.
She would definitely keep her.
She's still, okay,
yes.
perfect, thank you. Cause that was never my intention at all. It's just, I don't know if semantics is the appropriate phrasing, but what I've personally been struggling with is appointing someone that we never hear from, so. Do we want to have further discussion about the treasurer?
I have a suggestion,
Please bring it forward.
a discussion that, I have no problem with Ms. Hvac continuing to be the treasurer, but maybe, and I didn't go through and look at her job description, to tell you the truth, so, look at there, but, I don't know that the board has ever laid out the expectation of the treasurer or the responsibility to the board. So I think maybe a way to approach that is to update the policy or create a new policy, look at model policies, with the expectation as stated in statute, and then move forward from there, you know, giving sort of a grace that, you know, maybe those things were never laid out in the past. And that this is what the statute says, and that's what this board, is expecting,
Right.
right? And then we can visit all of the statutes in, relation to, you know, deposits and expenditures and those reporting items and all those types of things. As I have been thinking about that, how we bridge, cause I know what the board wants. The board just wants the things that the statute says that we should be getting, right?
Correct.
But I don't know that our policy says the board wants these things that are laid out in statute,
Right.
right?
Well, and we don't have a job description for the treasurer, on our website, so there's
Well,
nothing to
there you
reflect
go.
on that.
So,
Do we have a job description here?
Probably not, because when he was hired, how many years ago, I'd have to go look and see which one she signed.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so that would be sort of my suggestion is that, you know, we go ahead and appoint Ms. Hackney, fix the board's duty of job description, policy, and then the expectation moving forward is clear to everybody, right?
Yep.
I mean, that's,
That would be great.
so that's what I was thinking.
Okay.
So that would be my motion to reappoint Ms. Hackney and then the board create the policy and the job description regarding the treasurer.
And we did appoint her, right? Or we just tabled
temporary.
it?
Temporary.
Temporarily?
Temporarily.
Okay. So this would
With
be
no
through
date.
this year with the understanding that we have it corrected for the following year? Kinda.
Sure, I'll accept that amendment.
No, I was just clarifying.
Yes.
Well, I will second.
Having a motion and a second, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries. Alright, with that, go over the, I do need a motion to enter into, executive session per Idaho Code 74206. Yeah, but we amended 1B and I wasn't given the statute for
74204?
74204 was about amending. But it's 74206 1B and E, I believe. Let me check.
I think it's this one would just be.
I think the clerk said, thought it was B as well, again.
E is for personnel. We also need to go in.
Student.
Does it?
I think that's what she said.
Public student evaluation, public school student, so B covers a student as well.
Or a public school student, yeah.
Alright. So 206 1B.
So moved.
Second.
Hearing a motion and a second, you need a roll call vote?
Trustee Quimby.
Yes.
Trustee
Aye.
Jones. Trustee
Yes.
Mayhew. Chair Thompson.
Yes.
Vice Chair
Right.
Tracy.
Maybe.
Did you say maybe?
Baby. I couldn't help it. It's
I
always-
maybe.
It's always on the edge of my tongue, just like when she says, you
And you were on
know,
fire.
she says, I always want to be.
I wanna say.
There is no action needed to be taken. Oh, yeah, hold on, I didn't see that. This one's, thank you.
So we'll get mad because it's not online. I was gonna ask about. Any more?
We're not live streaming, but we did vote to go ahead and continue recording and then put them up there for people.
Because we just did that for the pandemic, right?
We went to,
Originally?
Originally,
Right.
yes, because before they were never recorded.
Right.
We gotta come out of executive session
Oh,
and finish our
okay.
discussion.
Sorry.
Are you,
We're live.
oh, we're
Well,
not?
not live, but we're recording. Sorry.
Oh.
We are live.
Okay,
yes.
all right, so now we are out of executive session. And there is no action that needs to be taken, so this concludes the meeting. Time is 8:47.
Could I just thank the board for indulging me this evening with those
Oh.
two guys?
Oh, no, thank